Growing up, most of us, or at least those of us with some sense, we were all convinced that quicksand was going to be a problem. Movies, cartoons, they made it seem like at some point in our adult lives, we were going to dramatically sink into the earth and vanish if we're not careful. But in reality, quicksand mostly just ruins your afternoon. You lose a shoe. If you're really unlucky, maybe you'll lose your horse. These days, the worst that's really going to happen is you lose your regrettable keyless start sedan that you should have probably not driven that close to the river anyway. But the cinematic, inescapable, physics-driven quicksand death? We're not getting it. Shilajit is the solution. Shilajit is a dense, mineral-rich resin. It's tar-like in texture and consistency, and it's formed over centuries as organic matter compresses in high-altitude mountain rock layers. In other words, it's a black sludge that seeps out of the rocks of the Himalayas. These days you'll see it sold as a supplement, mostly. They tell you to scrape off a rice grain-sized portion and to take it either under the tongue or mix it into your drink, and that'll give you better mental clarity and more energy. But full body immersion? Not recommended. But it's also not off the table. This is a physics breakdown with all the math involved of how long I would survive if hypothetically I stepped into a 6-foot deep vat of pure room temperature Shilajit resin. I am 4'11" tall, I weigh about 88 pounds at the time of this video, and let's say I'm stepping in flat-footed, no tools, no leverage, no way to climb out. The question is not if I die. It's how soon and why. What forces are going to be acting on the physical body weight? What slows me down? What's going to trap me into the death? And what finally stops the clock on consciousness and time itself? This is the timeline of that process. The math is real, the physics are solid, and by the end, there's no mystery left. Just numbers, inevitability, and the death that quicksand promised us, but only Shilajit can provide. Alright, so here's a polite disclaimer. This is the first PowerPoint presentation I've made in probably a decade, bear with me. First things first, at the moment of impact with the Shilajit, we've got surface tension versus body weight. So the surface tension of Shilajit, that is the only thing that is stopping me from plunging to my quicksand-adjacent death, and it's not going to be enough. Surface tension for water can be enough to stop a small bug, but the surface tension of Shilajit is not enough to stop me. The formula that we're using here, where's my cursor? There it is. It's going to be force equals gamma times L, so gamma being our acting surface tension coefficient, L being the contact length in meters, so that would be the length of each foot. So the surface tension that we're estimating Shilajit to have based on similar substances is going to be 0.015 newtons per meter. The contact length of my foot based on my shoe size, we're rounding that to about 0.2 meters. When we plug that in, so we've got our acting surface tension times my foot length, we have an upward resisting force of 0.003 newtons. That's it. That is all it has to try stopping me. That is 3/1000ths of a single newton trying to stop me and the force of gravity. So moving toward gravitational weight force, that's going to be my body weight, my downward body weight. As said before, my body mass is 88 pounds. That is 40 kilograms. And the formula that we're using here is that force equals mass times gravity or acceleration. So the gravity, assuming that we're on Earth when this is happening, we're just using the acceleration of gravity, which is 9.8. Plug that in. We've got 40 times 9.8 equals 392 newtons of downward force. This is not a contest. This isn't even resistance. This is just a mathematical formality. So it's going to instantly freaking break. The surface tension supports less than 8/1 millionths of the force that would be needed to hold me up. Here's the math showing that. The Shilajit instantly yields. I defeat it. That's it. No questions asked. Now, how small would I have to be to survive, though? None of my transitions working on this slide. How awesome. But to survive, I would have to weigh maximum 0.306 grams. I would have to be a fucking spider. I'm not a spider. So once the surface tension breaks, and it does, instantly, I'm going to start sinking. But it's not just a free fall. I'm still moving through a thick, heavy, sticky resin. The Shilajit is still pushing back, but slowly. That resistance is called the viscous drag, and we calculate it using Stokes' law, which is that force equals 6 pi times viscosity times radius times velocity, which is written here as F equals 6 times pi times eta times r times v, where eta, this little Greek letter here, that is the viscosity of the fluid, which we are estimating at about 20 Pascal seconds. R, being the radius of my leg, is about 0.1 meters, and my sinking velocity is going to be 0. That's a typo. That decimal point should be over 1, but the sinking velocity is going to be 0.01 meters per second. So we plug all that in, and we get, oh my goodness, I didn't mean to do that. We get per leg approximately 0.38 newtons. So the drag resistance total for both legs, it's only going to be 0.76 newtons. That's not enough to compete with gravity. Gravity is still pulling me downward with that full 392 newtons that we talked about earlier. So even with, I did not click that. So even with viscous fluid drag resistance slowing me slightly, I'm going to continue sinking. This is basically like trying to stop a falling brick with molasses. Alrighty. Now, as I sink to waist depth, the behavior of the Shilajit is going to start changing. In that suction kicks in. Shilajit is going to start acting like a yield stress fluid, so it's going to resist movement unless enough force is applied. Think of it like heavy cement mixed with glue. It's going to resist my movement unless there's enough force to yank me out of it. So we're going to calculate that resisting force, that suction force, as force equals yield stress times surface area. So tau, that little Greek letter there, in Pascal units, that's 200 pascals. A, which is my waist's cross-sectional area, needs to be calculated. I've got the circumference, 27 inches, which converts to about 0.686 meters to find the radius. R equals circumference divided by 2 pi, which is R equals 0.686 divided by 2 pi. That is the 0.109 meters for radius. And then for area, I'm not going to bore you going through all of that step by step. Surface area is going to be 0.0373 meters squared. So now we're going to calculate the suction force. F equals 200 pascals times 0.037, which comes to about 7.5 newtons of suction force. Meanwhile, the downward gravity of my body weight is still applying 392 newtons downward. So I keep sinking, but now something important has happened, and there's the suction at the hips, by the way, but I didn't want to go through all the steps for that. Something important has happened, though. Self-extraction is impossible. Even if I wanted to, even if I could grab onto something, I have no hope of pulling myself upward and out of the Shilajit. I have to complete my Shilajit death. And assisted extraction is not an option either, because if somebody were to walk in and find me like this, I'm the asshole who not only deliberately stepped into the 6-foot-deep Shilajit vat for no good reason, but I calmly stood there, allowed myself to sink to this depth, and then I'm going to ask them for help? Absolutely not. It is their duty, for the sake of survival of the fittest, I guess. They need to leave me in that Shilajit to die, the same way that mammoths left their dumbass brethren in the tar pits. Alright, so once the Shilajit resin has covered my chest, that's when shit escalates. Up until this point, I've been sinking slowly, trapped, but I could still breathe at least. But chest deep, the resin starts compressing inward. Think of it like a big ace bandage just trying to crush your rib cage closed. We calculate compressive force using force equals pressure times area, written as F equals P times A. So the pressure applied by the resin is estimated between 5 and 8 pounds per square inch. So we convert that to pascals to keep everything neat and tidy, with 1 psi equaling approximately 6,892.76 pascals, meaning that on the low end of our pressure range, at the 5 psi, we've got about 34,474 pascals. And then on the 8 psi side of the range, we've got 55,158 pascals. So that's our range. Next, we get letter A in that equation. So my chest circumference is about 33 inches or 0.838 meters. We throw that through a whole bunch of conversion to find radius and all that happy horseshit until we can finally get area. So A equals pi times radius squared, which gives us approximately 0.056 square meters. Now we're going to multiply that to get the compressive force. At the low end, F equals 34,000 times 474 pascals times 0.056 square meters, which equals roughly 1,930 newtons of inward force. And on the high end, F equals 55,158 pascals times 0.056 square meters, which is approximately 3,085 newtons of force crushing my ribcage. Meanwhile, my diaphragm, the muscle that expands our lungs, that maxes out at about 500 newtons of outward force or so. That's it. In medical units, which is millimeters of mercury, that's about 72. So even at the lowest estimate, the resin is applying nearly 4 times more force than my diaphragm can push back with to expand my lungs. So breathing is going to stop being a biological reflex, and it becomes a math problem that I lost in a very existential and irreversible fashion. So I cannot inhale at this point. My chest is not going to expand. Oxygen supply is running out. Finally, at around the 1 minute mark, since entering the Shilajit vat, that's when the resin finally covers my mouth and nose. No more air, no more gas exchange. From this point forward, I am living off of only whatever oxygen is still trapped inside my lungs and bloodstream. Under a calm and controlled condition, the average person can hold their breath for about 90 seconds to maybe 2 minutes max. But this is not controlled. I am pinned. My chest is compressed with nearly 2,000 to 3,000 newtons of force, depending on resin pressure. My diaphragm cannot expand. It's going to try, but it's not going to succeed. I cannot draw in any new air. Plus the stress spiking, heart rate, oxygen consumption stress. Oxygen consumption is going to skyrocket, so that last little bit left in my blood is going to be blown through pretty freaking quick. Realistically, I have maybe 45 to 60 seconds before blackout. Right, we have entered the final system failure. This is the end of the mortal countdown. As oxygen saturation in my bloodstream drops below 60%, the body is going to start shutting down. That's non-negotiable. First thing, the brainstem triggers survival mode. Vision narrows, hearing distorts into muffled static, not that I'd be able to hear a hell of a lot through the molasses filling my ears to begin with. The diaphragm is straining to draw air, but with nearly 2,000 to 3,000 newtons of pressure crushing my chest, it is physically impossible. Heart rate spikes, trying to compensate, but the math wins first. Without oxygen, neural function collapses, motor control fades, consciousness fractures, and around the 3 to 4 minute mark, my brain reaches critical oxygen deprivation. Electrical activity becomes erratic. Consciousness ceases, not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in a quiet, clinical sequence of systems shutting off one after another. I'm unconscious before my body's even done dying. But at this point, awareness is irrelevant. The Shilajit resin has finished what gravity started, and it has fulfilled what Quicksand promised. Alright, so when you go to the link on my website, you will find a tool that I have created to also help anyone else who would like to reap the gift that Quicksand promised. This is a Shilajit death calculator. You can choose metric units or imperial units. Let's do metric. Simply enter your weight and your height. So for weight, randomly we'll put 60 kilograms, and for height, let's put 200 centimeters. Calculate your resin dune. On your death timeline, you get some handy-dandy timestamps and the specific math. And on the other side, you get a full narrative. This is where the timestamps are. This one's a little more detailed. Surface break, feet and ankles, thighs engulfed, waist locked, chest compression, mouth submerged, blackout, and death. So this is a very useful tool, and it is available for you to use for free on my website. The link will be in the description for this video. Thank you, and happy sinking.